Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this new series of Snap by Siinda. So what's this new feature that Siinda is offering to its members and the community at large? This is Snap by Siinda. So we go through a regulatory overview, or we go through a trend or a different product release that's impacting the digital advertising space. And we try to explain that to you in a 10-minute video. So today we're going to do again a regulatory point because we're going to talk about the EU Data Governance Act. So what does it mean? Well, the EU Data Governance Act, it's been adopted at the end of June 2022, and it's a cross-sectoral regulation which aims at making more data available by boosting data sharing from public sector data, new data intermediaries, and data altruism. So although it's a new regulation, and sorry, it's 2022, not 2002, obviously. But there was a kickoff date because there was a 15-month grace period where all the covered entities had the time to put themselves in order and to benefit from this grace period to establish the compliance with the Data Governance Act. So the thing is that, you know, with the final dates of release and the final time span that has been put in place, although the enactment, let's say, took place in June 22, the final kickoff date, applicable date, was 3 days ago. So from the 24th of September 2023. So it means that now, 3 days since this date, all the companies and all the entities that are under the scope, let's say, of the EU Data Governance Act have to be compliant with the rules. So what does it mean? I mean, what are we talking about, and what are the information and the entity that are covered by the Data Governance Act? It's basically 3 major domains. So the first one is the reuse of certain public data, which were not available before as open data and are going to be more possible to be reused now. The second one is the setup of what is called data intermediation services. So this is a new feature that's been developed by the DGA, the Data Governance Act. And the third is the notion of the data altruism and sharing data out of data altruism, so without any compensation. So if we go to the first domain, the reuse of certain public data, of course, all the people involved in data sharing and in data already know about the Open Data Directive, or what we also call the PSI Directive, the Public Sector Information Directive, which enables the reuse for commercial or non-commercial purposes of certain types of publicly available data. But if the Open Data Directive, which latest iteration, let's say, was from 2019, and applicable acts on high-value data sets were adopted at the end of 2022. Nevertheless, Open Data Directive contained also some restrictions, meaning that there were some data which were not available for reuse under PSI because it was protected data. So some of the protected data under PSI were such as, for example, personal data, or data that contain personal information, or data that was protected by third-party rights. So, for example, by trade secrets, or by any type of restricting third-party rights, which would prevent the public sector body from making this data available. So what the Data Governance Act is trying to do is to change this paradigm and to put in place additional layers, be it on security or be it on technical requirements or on different data sharing practices, let's say, to enable the public bodies to share this data, which was not possible to be shared before, under certain processes, let's say, and restrictions and rules. So the first thing that the DGA is doing is putting in place some technical requirements from the public sector body to really protect privacy and confidentiality of the protected data. For example, by putting in place some secure data rooms where the data can be only seen, or by putting in place some processes with on-site consultation of the data, but not the possibility to harvest it or to reuse it and to take it from let's say, in digital formats. So there are different layers. And the more sensitive the data is, of course, the more protected its reuse is going to be. Plus, you obviously have to prove a legitimate interest in order to be able to access and reuse this data, and to yourself as a data user put in place some very strict layers to ensure that you protect it. Confidential information, so for example, belonging to trade secrets or business secrets, can only be disclosed for reuse with the consent of the entity or the person to whom it belonged. There is also a limited reliance on exclusive data reuse agreements for specific public interest cases. So it means that it's trying to unlock some of the existing reuse monopolies that were in place, where some public data only had one official and authorized reuser for certain types of data. The DGA is trying to unlock that and to break, let's say, the exclusive agreements approach. The fees that can be triggered by public bodies have to be based on marginal costs, so only the necessary cost incurred, and it cannot be a substitute for any type of loss or for any type of profit. Then the public sector body has a maximum of 2 months to decide on a reuse request, meaning that if you're a data reuser and you want to access a set of protected data under the DGA agreement, the PSB itself has to reply to you within 2 months. And in order to find better information, the EU has decided that it will put in place a European single access point for listing, let's say, the possibilities to reuse these types of data. The second aspect of the DGA, so you remember the 3 blocks. The first one was the reuse of protected PSI. The second is the question of data intermediation services. So the DGA defines a set of rules for data intermediaries who are, for example, data marketplaces, but this is just an example. The model is based on 2 key issues. The first is the neutrality, and the second is the transparency of data intermediaries. So they are acting as pipes, if you want, pipes for data. They are transmitting the data, but they have to remain neutral and not to interact with the data. And also transparent, meaning that they provide the data they really claim that they do, right? And the data intermediaries cannot directly use the data that they intermediate for any financial profits, and they have to really avoid conflicts of interest. So some clear boundaries have to be put together. That means in legal organization and in legal terms that there needs to be a structural separation between the data intermediation service and any other commercial or for-profit service that is provided. So it should be crystal clear that if you're acting as a data intermediaries, you cannot reuse the data that you transmit for your own products and services or to develop competitive products. And last but not least, so the process should of course be based on FRAND principles, so fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory. And last but not least, the intermediaries must notify the competent authority of their intention to provide the data intermediation services. So in order to ensure how this is going to work, the EU has decided to put together two recognition signs, let's say. The first one is a logo. So you see it here. that the data intermediary can put, and use as long as it's a recognized EU data intermediary. And the second one is an EU register of data intermediary services that's going to be managed by the European Commission. Sorry. Then the third point that we have on the DGA explanation is what we call the data altruism. So here the idea is to say there are individuals and companies who are giving consent to share the data they generate voluntary and without reward for the public interest. So the idea here is to create the conditions to enable this data altruism sharing and to provide trust. The entities that are sharing data based on data altruism will be able to be listed in a global register, similar to the ones for the data intermediaries, and they must have a non-for-profit character and meet some transparency requirements. And again, in order to ensure the trust and security, required compliance with a technical rule book that's going to be developed by the European Commission will be expected. So similar to the data intermediary part, the data altruism recognition works the same. So you have a logo of an EU recognized data altruism organization, and there will be also a register that's going to be developed and managed by the European Commission. So thank you very much. This was the end. This is the end of our Snap by Siinda today. It was on the EU Data Governance Act, which became fully applicable since the 24th of September 2023. You are here with Snap by Siinda. This is a service provided by Siinda to its members and its community, giving you in 10 minutes a snapshot on any new regulatory trend, product release, or digital services impacting the digital sector. Thank you very much.